Welcome to Southern California Edison's Wildfire Safety Community Livestream for Riverside County. My name is Jeremy Goldman, and I'm a Government Relations Manager for Southern California Edison. We greatly appreciate that you took the time to participate this evening, as well as submitting your questions when you registered for the meeting. I also want to thank Riverside County, as well as our state and federal and elected officials and their staff for joining us tonight. We appreciate that you always have open lines of communication, and we look forward to our ongoing partnership. I would also like to, let me start by saying that we recognized how important it is for you and your families to have electricity, especially during a pandemic when many of you are working and learning from home. Our company is focused on safely providing reliable service to our customers and communities. Our number one priority remains public safety. As California prepares for the upcoming wildfire season, we want to provide you with the latest information on how we're preparing and what you can do to be prepared. During the most recent wildfire season, we implemented public safety power shutoffs, or PSPS for short, to reduce the threat of wildfires. We know many of you experienced multiple PSPS events. We know these outages are painful and heard your concerns. We are committed to reducing the need of PSPS outages, and we'll be sharing more information during our presentation tonight. Please know, if you get disconnected or if you need to drop off early, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website at www.sce.com/wildfire. Next slide, please. As always, your feedback is extremely important to us, and we encourage you to submit questions because we have a large number of attendees. We'll be taking questions throughout the Q&A window. You should be able to see the window on your right-hand side. If there's a similar question already being asked that you would like answered, you can click on the heart icon next to the question to like it. We will address the questions that receive the most likes first, and we'll go down from there. We ask that you please ask questions that are relevant to the topic and the material being presented. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible in the allotted time. Next slide, please. I am joined tonight by the following presenters. We have Paul Gregot, Vice President of Asset Management Strategy and Engineering, who will discuss our wildfire mitigation and PSPS action plans. Terry Ohanian, Director of Expedited Grid Hardening, who will share our efforts to reduce the need for PSPS. Jessica Lim, who is a Principal Manager of Customer Service, who will share information on our customer care and community engagement efforts. We'll also have Eileen Flores, who you saw earlier, and myself, who also help throughout the meeting. Next slide, please. We plan to cover these topics as part of our presentation. We hope that the information presented will address many of your questions. Following our presentation, we will then open it up for Q&A to answer questions submitted in the Q&A window. Next slide, please. An emergency can happen at any time, so it's important to always be prepared. Here are some easy steps to remember from our partners at the California Fire Safe Council in Listos, California. Number one, get alerts to know what you do. Riverside County has Alert Rivco that you can sign up for, and your city may also have its own alerting system. You can help your family be prepared for any emergency situation with a safety preparedness plan, some basic supplies, and advanced plannings. Pack a go bag when you have to leave home in a hurry. Have a stay box for when you can't leave home. Prepare for at least 3 days without water or electricity for you and your family and pets. You can help your friends, family, or others you care about also get ready and plan ahead. These tips to help are to be prepared for any emergency. For more specific tips on preparing for a wildfire, earthquake, or other emergency, there are resources on our website, which we'll share at the end of the presentation. I will now hand it over to Paul. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jeremy, and good evening, everyone. I want to first express my sincere appreciation for your participation and engagement and joining us today. As Jeremy just covered, we have a lot of information to cover with you, and we do look forward to your questions. And so hopefully, please do take Jeremy's invitation accordingly and post your questions throughout the event this evening. Our conversation today, as Jeremy covered, is about wildfire safety overall, but it will also include improvements we are making to our public safety power shutoff program. 2020, as this slide illustrates, was a a year of unimaginable tragedy for many Californians. Across the year 2020 was the worst year on record across the state, with nearly 10,000 fires that burned over 4.2 million acres, which essentially equates to consuming about 4% of all land in California. And here in Southern California, close to home, from the summer months all the way to the end of the year and even into the beginning of this year, we had experienced record dry fuel levels and heat waves and lack of precipitation as part of last winter. In fact, rainfall totals in Central and Southern California were 50 to 75% below average this year. In addition, there were 70% more red flag warning days in 2020 versus 2019. For those of you that are not familiar with the term, red flag warning is an advisory that's put out by the National Weather Service that effectively is a proxy for warm temperatures, low humidity, high winds that collectively can result in high fire risk periods. And as you can see here on this chart, 5 of the 6 largest wildfires in California all happened last year, which is a sobering statistic and highlights the need for all of us to stay focused on our efforts to reduce the risk and mitigate the impacts. Next slide, please. So here I'd like to cover some key takeaways of our PSPS activity in 2020. Towards the end of last year and into the early parts of this year, we had more Santa Ana wind events and a higher risk for wildfire than in the prior year. And so we had to implement PSPS, or public safety power shutoffs, and temporarily shut off power on a number of instances to prevent our electric system from potentially becoming the source of ignition. PSPS events impacted, as the slide shows, about 138,000 of our customers, which we also recognize was further exacerbated by the challenges associated with the pandemic this year. We do understand and appreciate the difficulties that being without power has for people working from home, children going to school online, and for customers who have access and functional needs. Please know that we are taking into account the events of 2020 as learnings and are working to make significant progress in reducing the risk of wildfires, as well as reducing the impacts of PSPS as captured in our wildfire mitigation and PSPS action plan that I'll go over in a minute. For this year, unfortunately, we are already witnessing in high fire season, as we have already seen in the fire activity increasing during the last several weeks. Again, all of this underscores the importance of having a more resilient grid that will significantly reduce the risk of utility equipment potentially sparking catastrophic wildfires, and the need for PSPS as a tool of last resort. And so SC remains committed to keeping our communities safe by making our infrastructure more resilient against the increasing threat of extreme conditions driven by climate change. Next slide, please. So, an important part of the steps we are currently taking to keep our customers and communities safe is captured in our wildfire mitigation plan. So this is a comprehensive plan we submit to the CPUC, or California Public Utilities Commission, each year, and covers a wide range of topics or areas that we focus on, including hardening of our infrastructure, bolstering situational awareness, and enhancing operational practices to keep our communities safe. I'll provide an overview in this slide, and there's a lot to cover here that I want to spend a few minutes on some of the key approaches we are leveraging that addresses each of the 3 areas that I just described. First off is grid hardening. And Terry in a minute is gonna, or in a few minutes I should say, is gonna discuss this in more detail, specifically for Riverside County. But grid hardening is one of those key elements, as I just referenced. And an important part of our plan is the installation of insulated wire, or otherwise known as covered conductor, which you might have heard our company describe before. We are replacing bare wire, which is our current standard, was a current standard across the service territory, with new insulated wire. The insulated wire reduces the possibility of the power line from arcing or sparking if contact occurs with an object like a tree branch or a metallic balloon. Since 2018, we have installed about 400 miles, or circuit miles as we call it, of insulated wire in Riverside County alone, and we'll install more this year. We are also installing or constructing fire-resistant poles as part of our grid hardening program. This includes a mix of composite poles and wooden poles with fire-resistant wrap, which primarily serves to reduce the risk of damaged poles during an emergency and allows us to safely restore power more quickly to our customers, minimizing the impacts that result from a wildfire or even a PSPS event. We have installed almost 1,200 fire-resistant poles to date in Riverside County. Another element of our grid hardening program is upgrading our protective devices. We are installing what we call fast-acting fuses, which help interrupt electric current or energy effectively more quickly, and therefore reduces the risk of ignitions when there is an electrical fault in the system, on the electric system, such as when a tree, for example, falls on a power line, or branches fall on the power line, or other forms of debris connect into our power lines during high wind conditions. We are also installing what we refer to as remote controlled sectionalizing devices to segment or isolate portions of circuits during PSPS event. This is again to minimize the number of customers impacted. So we are installing more and more of these each year, which is really helping us reduce, again, the impact that those of you that might have experienced on PSPS. We are also exploring and pursuing undergrounding in some targeted circumstances. So we are identifying locations where undergrounding can provide, in fact, further meaningful wildfire risk reduction. But there are a number of challenges, with undergrounding that cause this path to take much longer to construct and is often more costly and difficult to maintain and repair, particularly in mountainous and rocky terrain. Insulated wires or covered conductors I referenced earlier are generally more cost effective and can be deployed much faster, which means faster wildfire risk reductions for our communities across our system. And then finally, we are also piloting a number of microgrids. So microgrids, as a reminder, is effectively also another form of self-contained electric grids, can provide round-the-clock energy for a limited time to a portion of the grid, a defined portion of the grid, which does remain tied to the wider electric system under normal conditions, but during an event is separated or islanded from that system. Microgrids may be able to minimize the duration and or breadth of impact from some PSPS events, and in certain instances prevent them altogether. Microgrids, however, are not a cure-all for PSPS or wildfires, but do represent one exciting tool in a broader toolkit to improve SCE's resiliency in the face of wildfires and other extreme weather. SCE, in fact, recently partnered with San Jacinto High School to launch a microgrid resiliency pilot, and I'll let Jessica discuss that in more detail a little bit later in the presentation. The second area that is part of our wildfire mitigation plan is our continued efforts to improve our situational awareness. So we have a team of meteorologists and also fire scientists that use a set of tools to better forecast and predict wildfires, and this becomes an important part in really informing our PSPS events, but also to some degree also informs our wildfire risk model. The first component of these tools includes our weather stations. I'm sure many of you have heard of these weather stations that we've been deploying over the last several years. These stations help us monitor location-specific real-time conditions that help inform operational decision-making and allows for more targeted de-energizations during PSPS events, and is accessible to the public, in fact, on our website. We have over 1,050 of these stations installed across our service area, with about 200 of these within Riverside County alone. And we are continuing to install more this year and beyond. We also leverage fire cameras, and we have about 160 of these fire spotting high definition wildfire cameras to provide, again, thorough visual coverage in high fire risk areas and help detect early on the evidence of a potential fire starting. Fire agencies and the public can also view the camera feeds to monitor these conditions. And then we've also developed sort of a package of capabilities that we're referring to as fire modeling capabilities. That includes fuel sampling of the vegetation on a regular basis that provides us a good sense of the fuel conditions and moisture out there. We also have expanded or increasing our computing power to enable some modeling using supercomputers. And we are also evaluating our fire spread modeling technology and leveraging historical data sets, including trending, to help evaluate impacts to communities from wildfires during extreme weather events. And then lastly, as part of our wildfire mitigation plan, we are also enhancing our operational practices. So it starts with inspections of our infrastructure. SCE annually inspects its overhead transmission, distribution, and generation equipment in high fire risk areas to identify potentially safety hazards. So we prioritize the highest risk structures that we inspect each year, and as identified by our advanced risk models. Ground inspections by field crews, as well as aerial inspections using drones and helicopters, are conducted to obtain a full view of our equipment and provide essentially the best information we have at any point in time of the state of our assets, and then leading to some maintenance activities that may need to be prioritized to ensure our system is as safe as can be. It also includes our vegetation management program. This is sort of the enhancing of our operational practices component. Our veg management program, as we call it, is also a key part of this wildfire mitigation plan. We inspect about 1.4 million trees each year across the service territory to determine if any one of these trees could pose a hazard by making contact with our power lines. And in addition, all trees up to 200 feet away from the wires will be assessed and may be pruned or removed if they demonstrate a high risk of falling into the lines. In 2021, we plan to assess approximately up to 200,000 hazard trees in high fire risk areas and remove them if deemed unsafe. We are also planning to remove about 11,000 palm trees over the next 2 years that may come in contact with our power lines. Palm fronds, by the way, do represent a significant portion of debris flying onto our lines that could cause an ignition and therefore pose a risk to public safety. Customers who have palm trees affected by this program will be contacted by SCE to discuss. And then lastly, our enhanced operational practices includes our public safety power shutoff program. Again, as a tool of last resort to ensure we can protect our communities from the threat of wildfire. I'll describe more on the next slide about how we decide to implement PSPS. Next slide, thank you. So for each PSPS event, we'll activate our PSPS management team, led by an incident commander to manage the event and make decisions to shut off power based on real-time conditions and information. So this incident management team is following the incident command system, a system that's well utilized by the industry and sponsored by the FEMA organization. Terry and I, it so happens, are also trained incident commanders and have had to manage, in fact, a number of critical events over the years, including PSPS events. We consider executing PSPS and activating for it when weather and fire experts that we work with forecast dangerous conditions, including strong winds, very dry vegetation, and low humidity. Combined, these various criteria do create the risk that flying debris or other damage to our wires and equipment could cause a fire with the potential to spread rapidly. Our meteorologists and fire scientists review weather conditions using both the internal weather models and external weather models and National Weather Service forecast alerts and warnings. We'll also speak with county offices of emergency management to discuss any public safety issues before we make any decisions. We do not take the decisions to shut off power lightly and ask the following questions of ourselves before making a decision. Is this shut off absolutely needed to protect public safety? And do we have time to safely reduce the number of customers who lose power as a result of this particular activation? This is just a quick summary, what I've laid out here of some of our decision points, but as referenced on this slide, which you'll have access to, we have created a new web page that has more detailed information at this particular website on PSPS decision points. Now I'd like to maybe discuss a little bit more our PSPS action plan, provide a little bit more detail on what we do there. If we could move to the next slide. Thank you. So as mentioned earlier, we do seriously take the concerns we heard about our PSPS executions and know we have to do better. There's no question. We filed, in fact, a PSPS action plan, some of you might have heard about, with the California Public Utilities a little bit earlier this year, that address 5 areas, and the 5 areas that I'll cover here are on the slide. First, the area that addresses the need for reducing PSPS. This means effectively, ultimately hardening the grid. Hardening the grid is going to be our path of ultimately reducing the scope, the frequency, and the duration of PSPS events, especially to help those areas where our customers have been impacted numerous times, as Jeremy referenced a little bit earlier. While this doesn't mean that there won't be situations in which PSPS ultimately won't still be needed, the frequency and duration should significantly decrease, as you'll hear more about in the next few slides that Terry will be covering. The second area of focus for us is to improve our execution of PSPS events. So this means effectively pursuing ways where we expect to provide better transparency into the decision-making process, which again I shared on the previous slide, and providing access to this information to our various stakeholders, including our customers. We also understand the issues and frustrations surrounding how notifications of PSPS events are received and are working to make significant improvements to our notifications that you receive before, during, and after PSPS events. We've observed that, we've heard the feedback, and we are taking steps to address that. The third area of focus is reducing the impacts of PSPS for when they do occur. We will be increasing our efforts to reduce the impact when these PSPS events do occur, especially on our most vulnerable customers. So we will be working to increase enrollment in our medical baseline program and expand participation in other areas, such as our critical care battery backup program and other incentives to support providing more backup solutions. We'll also be working with local and tribal governments to further look at ways to increase community resiliency by expanding our services that will enhance the safety of our community overall. The fourth area of focus is to keep our partners and customers clearly and consistently informed. You can expect better ways to receive educational material, informational materials, including our website for information about PSPS. And for our public safety partners, we will leverage technology to improve information sharing and coordination as we work together, plan, and respond in a more comprehensive way. And lastly, we are working to enhance and improve our post-event reporting to make them more transparent and clear for our stakeholders. We've learned a lot, in our experiences so far, and these reports go a long way in continually reflecting and improving on our performance after every event. In a nutshell, the outcomes we are expecting as part of this implementation of our PSPS action plan are to, 1, reduce the scope and frequency of PSPS, 2, improve our coordination and engagement with our partners and critical infrastructure customers, 3, expand our outreach and enrollment with vulnerable customers, and lastly, 4, improve our post-event reports. And now I'll hand it over to Terry to cover grid hardening and our efforts to reduce the need for PSPS. Terry.
Good evening, and thank you, Paul. I'm Terry Ohanian, and I'll be covering one of our focus areas, which is to reduce the need for PSPS. And to that end, we've developed a concentrated effort focusing primarily on frequently impacted circuits, or circuits that experience 4 or more PSPS power shutoffs since 2019. The effort is targeted for the hardest hit communities, but I do want to reinforce that general grid hardening efforts go well beyond these hard hit circuits. So I don't want to imply that we are ignoring other customers or that other circuits are left behind, but I believe it's appropriate to focus this effort on those that experience the most public safety power shutoffs over the past couple of years. So this targeted effort is what we call expedited grid hardening, and is what I will primarily be discussing today. Our goal is to achieve reductions in the number of customers impacted, reductions in the number of PSPS events, and reductions in the duration of an event should it occur, and to complete this work in the time frame between now and October 1, which is historically when we see our highest PSPS impacts. What we'll share today is where we are at this point. As Paul said earlier, we understand 2020 was a particularly difficult year. We learned from these events so that we can improve. And actual events from prior years gives us a lot of insight on specific areas that we need to target. So this expedited effort is exploring a number of tools that we believe will improve the customer experience. So on the next slide, some of these tools are shown in the table. We're going to go to the next slide, please. Paul covered some of these earlier. The key is, what can we do in this short time frame? Really, what we want to do is get in front of the next PSPS season. The first one is replacing our bare wire with insulated wire. Paul covered this earlier. Bare wire is open to the elements, and if things come in contact with these wires, it creates what's effectively an electrical explosion and will likely result in a power outage and possibly an ignition when the debris does come in contact with the line. So, palm fronds, tree branches, mylar balloons, any debris just about that blows into our lines can cause this to occur. Installing covered conductor or insulated wires eliminates this unintentional contact from becoming an ignition. And what this does for PSPS, by insulating our wires, we're able to raise our wind speed thresholds to a level that essentially makes PSPS events become unlikely. I'll also note that insulated wires has reliability benefits beyond PSPS events, as we know that wind occurs throughout the year. You all know that, and those can cause power to be shut off, not just PSPS related. So regardless of the accidental contact that occurs, that can cause power shutoffs. And so, there's benefits here beyond just PSPS. Second method listed here is segmentation. It was a focus area for us last year. We're building on that in 2021. It involves installing remote controlled automated switches that allow us to de-energize specific smaller areas of concern. And the benefit here is that we can reduce the number of customers impacted or the duration for some of those customers. The third method is installing new weather stations. Again, Paul covered some of this. It gives us, it's another way we can reduce PSPS because it gives us awareness of events going on the ground. Constant wind, temperature, humidity, and other weather data just gives us precision about weather at a specific location. And when we couple that with automated switches, gives us the ability to turn off power in smaller areas or even avoid turning off the power altogether. The next tool is enhanced switching protocols. So many of our circuits have an electrical connection to an adjacent circuit. And if that adjacent circuit is not impacted, or let's say it's already been hardened, there may be an opportunity to switch some customers to the adjacent circuit. It would have to be customers located in an area where we didn't have a concern about PSPS. And through the use of an automated switch that I just described, we can decouple a portion of our customers that are not in a high wind area from their main circuit and switch them over to the adjacent circuit. So again, it only works if the nearby circuit is not affected by PSPS. But as we continue to harden circuits in a particular area in a community, we get this community benefit effect, allowing greater numbers of customers to switch over to adjacent circuits. The fifth item is updating our operational protocols regarding the use of PSPS. And this is where recent changes in the environment may cause us to reassess the condition of the fuels on the ground and other factors, and it may allow us to remove certain customers in particular sections of line from PSPS entirely. An example of that might be a lack of vegetation in the area, possibly due to a recent fire. So on the next slide, I want to just cover a question we typically get. It's why does my neighbor have power and I don't? So if we go to the next slide, before I move on to an actual example, I just wanted to share that oftentimes people ask us, my neighbors across the street have power and I don't, or if I live in an underground area, why am I being de-energized? And the answer to that is that it depends on the circuit that feeds your home as compared to your neighbor. So the picture, if we can go to the next slide, please. Not sure we're able to move it, but what we're intending to show here is that there may be homes that are served by underground lines, but before it goes underground, the circuit may have an overhead section that traverses over a high fire area, and that area may be subject to PSPS. So a lot of times, you may be fed by underground services, but it may originate from an overhead line that traverses through a high fire area, so that you can still be subject to PSPS. Other examples, include overhead sections. Maybe you live in an area that's not particularly windy, but again, same situation. If there's a portion of that line that is fed in an area that's a high fire concern, where the winds are blowing, we may have to PSPS that particular area. Okay, so let's go to an actual example. Let's go to the next slide. This is I'm sorry, before I get to the actual example, this is just all the circuits that are subject to expedited grid hardening in Riverside County. There are 14 circuits that are listed here. Again, these experienced 4 or more PSPS outages since 2019. And so I'm going to talk about one of them specifically. There's a website listed there where you can go to for additional information. So let's go to the next slide. And this particular example is called the Dartmouth circuit. So I just want to take you through the process that we went through. We've repeated this for all the circuits. There were 72 circuits that we call frequently impacted. And so we actually conducted a series of deep dives. And so I'll just share a little bit of some of the thinking and some of the logic that we went through. But in this case, this is the Dartmouth circuit. It's located in both the eastern portion of San Jacinto and also the Sabova Reservation. This circuit serves about 1,350 customers. And on the map on the left, it shows underground portions in green and overhead portions in orange. The substation that the circuit originates from is at the bottom of the map, and it's shown in a blue circle. Think of the substation as where the electricity originates from and flows out from there. In this case, it goes from the substation in the lower middle of the map, flows up, and to the left, eventually branching out to the upper right portions where you have more of the mountainous areas and the high fire areas of the circuit. In the early days of PSPS, if we had a concern on this line, we would likely open a circuit breaker at the substation and turning off the power on the entire line, essentially de-energizing all 1,350 customers. I don't show it on the map, but today we've created three distinct segments on this circuit. Segments give us the ability to reduce the number of customers impacted. So the easiest way to think about this is the first third of the circuit is roughly segment 1. The second third is roughly segment 2, and the last third is segment 3. If we had wind speeds at the upper right portion of the circuit, that would be segment 3, that were concerning, but the remainder of the circuit was not experiencing high winds, then with this process, we would be able to turn off the power just at segment 3. So I want to also note that there are some green underground sections at the end of the line there in segment 3, and so as I discussed earlier, those areas would still be subject to PSPS, even though they are underground, because they are fed from overhead lines. So during a review of this circuit, the team was focused on what can be done to reduce the need for PSPS. And there were three primary actions that the team recommended. They're shown in the planned work section on the upper right of this slide. The first one is to implement a new operational protocol, shown in the area of the map that's in the large dashed line. After reviewing the fuels, the ground condition in this area, we believe the conditions there are less concerning, and so we have already raised the wind speed thresholds for that portion of the circuit, reducing the likelihood that this area would be the cause of a PSPS outage. So that's the first change we made for 2021. Just beyond that area, the terrain and the fuels become more of a concern. You'll notice a smaller dashed area. That area is predominantly green. It's a rather large underground section. There's about 200 customers there. And should this area be subject to PSPS, what we intend to do here is bring in a temporary generator. It'll be locally positioned, and during a PSPS event, we'll turn on the generator and it's just the underground portion here, just those underground customers energized. So I want to note that in order to connect the generator and disconnect it at the end of the event, there will be a short outage, possibly 30 minutes, maybe even up to an hour, but it would be significantly shorter than the PSPS event, or otherwise we wouldn't do it. Lastly, there's a number of areas there that are pointed out by arrows labeled as planned insulated wires. So these sections of overhead, we intend to install new insulated wires, replace our bare wire with insulated wires. And once this occurs, this will allow us to raise the wind speed thresholds in this segment, significantly reducing the likelihood that a PSPS event would occur. And if there was a PSPS event, it likely will be shorter in duration. And the reason for that is because raising the threshold, wind speeds gradually tend to rise over time, and you're going to reach that higher threshold later in the event, and you'll come back down sooner. So an event that would have been 20, 30 hours or more could shrink considerably. So if an event were to occur and we were to breach the higher thresholds, likely it would be shorter as well. So this brings us a couple things here on the lower right portion. We expect to complete this work by September. Typically the largest PSPS events occur in the October timeframe, so that's our goal, is to be ready before that were to occur. The benefits by doing this work, it's in the bottom right portion of the slide. We've calculated a 90% reduction in the outage time experienced by customers. And the key here is if these plans, the way to think of this, if these plans had been in place during the 2020 PSPS season, there would have been a 90% reduction in the outage times experienced by customers. So it's fairly significant and consequential for those customers on the Dartmouth. It represents an example of a circuit. They're all different. The focus was to do what we could to eliminate, or reduce the need for PSPS in this time frame. There are still obstacles to overcome. There's a lot of construction work to do here. It's expedited. So we've got, we're focused on permits, resources, environmental constraints. We will comply with all environmental laws and regulations. Other things can still get in the way, inclement weather, summer heat storms, other factors, but we are really committed and focused to getting this work done in time before the next PSPS season. So the next slide, if we can, there we go. So this is just an aggregate view of the 14 circuits that are in Riverside County that were frequently impacted. They all have their own unique mitigation plans. As I mentioned earlier, we held deep dive sessions for each one. What can we do in the short run? And the graphs depict the results of the PSPS performance during 2020, and then what likely would have occurred in 2020 if we had our planned mitigations in place last year. The dark gray bars are what actually occurred last season, and the higher the bar, the bigger the PSPS event, so that's obviously not good. The orange is what we believe would have happened in 2020 if we had the mitigations in place. So overall, for the frequently impacted circuits, Riverside County would have seen an 87% reduction in PSPS power outage impacts across these 14 circuits, if we can complete the grid hardening work. These results assume the same weather conditions as last year. No one can predict the future weather this fall, so we don't know if 2020 will be a repeat. So I just wanted to make that caveat, but I will say, subject to that caveat, Riverside County should see a significant improvement in PSPS. And like I mentioned earlier, there's an overall community benefit. This 87% reduction in the general area provides benefits beyond the individual circuits. So, and by community benefit, it just means that improving circuits nearby, there may be times when we can keep customers' power on if that adjacent circuit is not impacted. Okay, so with that, I want to turn it over to Jessica Lynn.
Great, thank you. Good evening, my name is Jessica and I work in the SCE's Customer Service Department. And first off, I want to thank all of you so much for taking time in your busy evening to join us for this informational meeting. I also want to acknowledge that we understand PSPS events are disruptive to your lives. Therefore, I will be speaking about how you can best prepare for PSPS events and how SCE is supporting our customers. So the first topic that I will cover is how we notify and keep customers informed. If SCE determines that a PSPS event is necessary as a last resort due to dangerous weather conditions, we notify our public safety partners, local and tribal governments 72 hours in advance so that they can start their preparation activities. We then notify our customers 48 hours in advance. And we also provide notifications along the way. We provide notifications in a variety of languages and methods that customers can choose from to better ensure that all customers are receiving notifications. So customers can choose to receive notifications through email, text, or a voice call. For anyone that does not have an SCE account, but would also like to stay informed, they can choose to sign up for what we call a zip code alert to receive alerts about a specific zip code. Or customers can sign up for alerts through Nextdoor on social media. We have heard feedback from our customers regarding our notifications, and we are currently working to improve them by making them more transparent and more clear for our customers. We are also in discussions with the County Offices of Emergency Management to explore the use of emergency radio broadcasts for areas with poor cell service. Customers will receive alerts to keep them informed along the way, before, during, and after events. So it is really important to sign up to receive these alerts if you are not already. The link to sign up will be provided at the end of this presentation. In addition to alerts, We have a dedicated PSPS webpage on sce.com where you can receive helpful information such as fire weather and a map where you can enter your address to receive outage status information, such as if a location is still under consideration, de-energized, or not impacted by PSPS. The page map will also provide the nearest location of an SCE Community Resource Center, which I will speak more about on our next slide. So the outage map is pretty easy to use, and you just go to sc.com/PSPS, enter your address, and you'll get custom information. So just a reminder there, and to sign up for our alerts and notifications. If we can go to the next slide, please. All right, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this slide because I do want to make sure that everyone's aware of all the customer care programs that we provide our customers with resources to help reduce the impact of PSPS events. So I want to start with our backup power rebates and incentives for our most vulnerable customers. We offer a fully subsidized critical care backup battery program. This program provides a free battery and solar charging panel that will help our customers that rely on an electrically powered medical device. To be eligible for this program, customers need to be enrolled in our medical baseline program, reside in a high fire risk area, and be enrolled in one of our income qualified rate discount programs, CARE or FARA. Now, CARE stands for the California Alternate Rates for Energy, and FARA stands for Family Electric Rates Assistance. And to check if you reside in the high fire risk area, you can go to the California Public Utilities Commission website, which is the link provided at the end of this presentation. And you can go and search for the fire risk map. And so SCE is reaching out to all eligible customers to make them aware of this program. So again, the name of the program is the Critical Care Backup Battery Program. It is for those that are enrolled in our medical baseline program. They live in a high fire risk area and they're low income on our CARE or FARA rate. We also have 2 rebate and incentive programs to help offset the costs of investing in the resiliency. We offer a $50 rebate to all customers for a portable battery, which could range from $100 to maybe a couple $1,000s, depending on the size of the battery, to power devices such as your modem and or router for ongoing internet access, charging your cell phone, laptop, iPad, and even some larger appliances such as refrigerators. For customers that are dependent on pumping water for everyday home and small business needs, we offer portable generator rebates, and those costs also range between $100 to a few thousand. So we offer a $300 rebate, and then we offer a $500 rebate for income qualified customers enrolled in CARE or FARA, residing in a high fire risk area. And for customers that are looking for a whole house battery system using batteries such as a Tesla Powerwall, SCE's self-generation incentive program has been enhanced with higher incentives and a 50% upfront incentive payment for qualifying customers that reside in a Tier 2 or Tier 3 high fire risk area or have experienced 2 or more PSPS events, and they meet additional qualifications such as income or have a dependency on an electrically powered medical device. So I know that this is a lot of information to remember. So just remember that we do have links to all of these programs at the end of this presentation where you can learn more about the details. So just in summary, for the rebates and programs that we offer, we do have a variety to meet your needs, whether you are dependent on an electrically powered medical device, or if you don't meet any qualifications, including any low-income qualifications, you could still participate in that $50 rebate, and you could still participate in the self-generation incentive program, but at lower incentive levels. So I encourage you all to just take a look to see what we have, and we have a variety to meet your needs. And I'm going to move on to care during outages. So for local care during PSPS outages, we activate community resource centers in or near impacted communities by partnering with local community groups. And we also have the option of deploying our community crew vehicles to locations where a community resource center might not be available. So just think of the community resource centers as brick and mortar places, and our vehicles are mobile, where we go and we park and occupy a parking lot, for example. On-site services that are provided at these centers by trained SCE staff include handing out resiliency kits, which include small resiliency items, such as a flashlight or LED backup bulb, solar-powered cell phone chargers, personal protective equipment such as gloves and hand sanitizers, a voucher for ice to use in a cooler or refrigerator to store perishables, along with providing light snacks and water. We also provide information about the PSPS event and customer programs, assistance with signing up for notifications, and depending on social distancing safety, we provide on-site mobile charging as well. And at certain locations and weather conditions, we also provide firewood, blankets, and bulk water. We also have a hotel discount program with participating hotels where we've negotiated 15 to 20% discounts for our customers. During events, we post the locations of these activated community resource centers, which could change per event, or community crew vehicles on our website. And that website is sc.com/PSPS. And again, it'll be in the presentation. And we also communicate the locations of these services with our public safety partners, community-based organizations, and online through social media. So for community safety, we are piloting resiliency backup power solutions. Our Resiliency Zones program is intended to provide temporary backup power to keep those essential services energized, such as a neighborhood gas station, supermarket, police, or fire stations. And we have recently completed the construction to enable backup power at the Cabazon Fuel Center. And then lastly, SCE continues to explore opportunities for microgrids to provide self-contained electric power separated from the grid when needed. For SCE recently partnered with the San Jacinto Unified School District to launch a microgrid resiliency pilot. We retrofitted the high school with a microgrid control system to enable the use of their existing solar and storage assets to be able to island operate separately from the grid, their school during an extended outage, and to be used as a potential emergency site for the community through the American Red Cross. So we can move on to the next slide, please. We are making every effort to educate our customers and communities through various channels and forums, such as the one we're having this evening. These meetings are an opportunity for SCE to share what we are doing to protect public safety and reduce the impact of PSPS. But equally important, we want to hear from you on what is working and what is not. Is the information and products and services we are providing helpful? How can we enhance them to be even more helpful? I really encourage you to share your thoughts in the chat or in the survey following this meeting so that we can capture your feedback. In addition to community forums such as this, SCE launches an annual marketing campaign early in the year that includes a variety of channels to reach customers to help them be more prepared for emergencies and PSPS events, such as the use of social media, digital ads, radio, and partnerships with our community-based organizations. We've also recently mailed a newsletter to all of our customers to provide preparedness information along with available programs and services. We are focused on ensuring our most vulnerable customers are aware and prepared. We have actively taken steps to identify those customers requiring heating or cooling. We take extra precaution with our most critical care customers. When we can't confirm that notifications have been received, we send an SCE representative to their home to notify them in person and make sure they have an emergency plan. We also work closely with local and tribal governments, public safety partners, and essential service providers such as telecom providers and water agencies to help them prepare for PSPS by having meetings ahead of time with them and during events so that they can provide resiliency for their customers as well. Next slide, please. So here are some actions that you can take to be prepared. We have a webpage, sc.com/wildfire, that has all the information and resources related to wildfire and PSPS. So I would encourage you to take a moment to go to that website, take a look around and see all the different information and resources that are available that we provide. We have a webpage that also has other information that I mentioned earlier, sc.com/PSPS, and that's another great resource. And if you have questions, you can contact us by email, social media, or by phone. You will also be getting a survey after this meeting, and please provide feedback, which will help us to shape the services and support that we provide going forward. We're always looking at ways on how we can do better to serve our customers. And you will also have the opportunity to ask questions that we weren't able to get to this evening in that survey. So as I mentioned earlier, please sign up or verify that you are signed up for PSPS alerts and update your contact information if needed. Please also review all the programs and services that SCE provides, especially if you are dependent on electrically powered medical equipment. You may be eligible for SCE's Medical Baseline Program and the Critical Care Backup Battery Program. Additional rebates and incentives are also available on our website, as well as financial assistance programs to help you make payment arrangements on your bill, or to also receive bill discounts by signing up for our low-income rates programs. And then we also have payment arrangements as well. And I'll just want to end with the most important message, which is an emergency can happen at any time. You can help your family be prepared with a safety preparedness plan, some basic supplies, and advanced planning. So whether the emergency is a pandemic, an earthquake, or a wildfire, preparedness will help everyone stay safer. So with that, that concludes the formal presentation, and I will turn it back over to Jeremy to begin our Q&A session.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jessica, Terry, and Paul for the presentation. We have a number of questions tonight, so remember, if you have additional questions, please go ahead and post them in the chat. So let me dive right in. First question, I think this should probably go to Paul. And the question is, does SCE allow for wildfire cameras to be placed on their poles? Is there any type of grant project? And the resident lives up in the La Cresta, Tanaja, Santa Rosa Plateau area, up in the Santa Ana mountain areas.
Thanks, Jeremy, and thank you for the question. So first off, I can't speak to the specific area that the person referenced here, but I will say that really our camera installation program is really not intended to monitor, if you will, detailed activity at a street or neighborhood level. Frankly, that we may enter into some privacy issues by going there, but really our intent is to make sure that we have sort of a wider spectrum view of our most vulnerable areas that could experience wildfires, whether or not connected, by the way, with our system. And we are working closely with universities and other agencies in the state our peer utilities across the state of California has a similar program. We share all of this information. Fire agencies can actually control the cameras. They can use it to proactively respond to potential events of a wildfire, of an event that could become a wildfire. So all that to say, poles is not really our focus. If anything, we look at towers and other high structures that are in elevated positions, probably on hills or mountains, that provide us a wide spectrum view of the areas that are most susceptible to experience a wildfire.
Great, thanks, Paul. And I would just remind folks that you can go to alertwildfire.org and you can take a look at the existing cameras that are there. I believe there are a number that are active in Riverside County right now. So next question. Questions asking specifically about the Shawa circuit. What are the upgrades being planned? I believe we did reach out to you directly, so if you could get us your address, we will research that further. But there's also a question, and I believe this should go to Terry, regarding a PSPS where one section of the segment is de-energized and the other is not. I know you talked about that in the presentation earlier, but can you just reinforce why that's the case?
Yeah, so that it's really speaks to the segmentation effort that we've been involved with. Our goal is to minimize the impact to customers. If we can keep customers up, we will do it. And we also, during events, we do our best to, we don't de-energize just because, let's say necessarily the forecast says it's going to get up there. We wait until we hit certain thresholds to do it, and we do it by segments. So it's very possible that a particular circuit may have segments that are impacted, but if the other segments are not experiencing the same types of concerns, we will do everything we can to avoid de-energizing those customers. And let me just also say, because circuitry originates from a substation, let's just say generally outward, oftentimes the segments closest to the substation can dictate what happens to all the customers beyond that. So if out of the substation it's impacted, oftentimes we have to de-energize larger numbers of customers.
Gotcha. Thank you, Terry. Next question, I think this will go to Jessica, asking how Edison is coordinating with the telecom companies and county emergency management departments to make sure residents are getting those notifications in the event of a PSPS. I believe you did touch on that a little bit in your presentation earlier.
Yeah, sure. So I will first of all cover that we do work very closely with our public safety partners, which also includes our critical infrastructure company partners, such as telecommunications companies. So we have a number of meetings prior to wildfire season. And in these meetings, we make sure that at least, for the telecom question, we provide years worth of data on where we have had our PSPS events so that the telecom companies can be prepared in their resiliency planning so that they will know which of the areas they are likely needing that they will need to provide backup generation for. And then as far as notifications, we do provide these public safety partners with a 72-hour notice in advance so that they can start preparing and getting their resiliency plans up and going, whether that might include backup generation. So then we notify our customers, such as yourselves, at the 48-hour mark. So I hope that answers the question. Jeremy, if you want to elaborate.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jessica. And again, reminder, if you have any additional questions, to please go ahead and post them in the chat. So next question would go to Terry, asking about construction notifications. When we're out, our crews are out there doing work, how do we notify the residents? How do we notify property owners association about the work was coming? What's the best way for residents to stay engaged?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways that we do this. First is for the customers directly impacted by the outage, they will get a notification, typically a week to 10 days in advance, and that occurs through a variety of methods. So they'll be directly notified that an outage is coming, and it'll have the date and time, the duration of the outage. This is for a planned maintenance outage. And then other things that we'll do, depending on the community and how big the impact, we post signs along the roadways indicating that work is going to be occurring. We also send what we call Dear Neighbor letters to oftentimes let residents in the general area know that there's going to be construction work occurring. And then, other times we work with elected officials to let them know that there's work, in the area. if we think there's going to be a particular impact to a community, I think one of the questions that might have been this one, involved, let's say there's one road in, one road out, and there's going to be a lot of construction traffic. We'll often try to work with local officials there as well. So we do everything we can to try to keep people informed of what's occurring, but it can be tough sometimes reaching everybody. But we're committed to at least getting Dear Neighbor letters out and letting people know that work is coming.
Thanks, Terry. And if the attendee who asked that question sends us an email, let us know which POA you're referencing, we can research that further as well. So thank you for that. Next question, I believe this will go to Paul. Does hardening also include protection from electromagnetic pulse, EMP, and how about protection from cyber attacks?
Yeah, good question. Absent wildfire, all of our construction standards do effectively mitigate any risk of EMP. So that is sort of a basic part of our standards, engineering standards that we have out there. As far as cyber is concerned, that is as you probably all know, a growing concern for our industry and has been for years, but it's only getting more exacerbated by the fact that we are installing more automation and things are more and more connected, if you will. So it's a very big focus of our company specifically. I'm not going to get into the specifics of all that, but we are very conscious of that risk, and we believe we're taking appropriate steps and are very engaged with the appropriate agencies.
Great, thank you, Paul. Next question, I believe both Paul and Terry are going to have an answer on this. You're going to touch on this. The insulated 8 miles, how about undergrounding instead? And I believe this is in reference to the Dartmouth circuit out near San Jacinto. So you guys want to touch on that a little bit and the grid hardening project that's taking place right now? Yeah,
so I mean, generally speaking, and I touched on this a little bit in the presentation that I provided, the part of the presentation I provided. Undergrounding is significantly more costly and more time consuming than installing insulated wire, which is a very standard practice. It's becoming a standard practice in our industry and is actually quite effective and has proven to be very effective for us so far. So we can mitigate risk for many more communities, many more customers at a faster pace. So in this particular case, Terry was describing, and he may get into a little bit more detail, a very focused effort that our company has been engaged in over the past several months to make sure that we mitigated very specific targeted circuit segments by a certain time frame, namely October 1st. And so as Terry will probably get into a little bit more, undergrounding involves, frankly, engaging many agencies. It requires permits, maybe even environmental reviews, depending on the disturbance. Again, it's much more time consuming. There's probably no way we could have accomplished a fraction of that circuit by that time frame, but maybe Terry can address specifically more the Dartmouth, because I believe that was a question at hand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Paul. And what was on our mind when we were going through the circuit reviews is what can we do? We needed to make a meaningful difference. Arguably from our standpoint, we wanted to get the construction work done by the September timeframe to make sure give ourselves a little bit of contingency and float in the schedule to make sure we beat the October PSPS season. And we just didn't consider underground for this particular effort, but undergrounding is part of a longer term view. There may be some areas that are applicable, but Paul's absolutely right. Anytime you disturb the earth in this way, in this consequential way, there's environmental surveys and a number of agency permits, and it can be quite a time consuming process.
Great. Thank you, Terry and Paul, for that. Next question deals with notifications, and Jessica, I'll go with you. What is SCE doing to really make sure that notifications correlate with the real-time actions? I know you mentioned the website updates, you mentioned the different types of notifications customers can sign up for. Can you touch on that and what we're doing to make sure the real-time information is being provided to our customers?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. That's an area that we are striving to get better at. And I think that it starts with better weather forecasting. So in our PSPS action plan, we are investing in more weather computational sort of machine learning as well as that weather forecasting and equipment. So it does start with that space, and that'll have us be able to provide more accurate notifications. We are making a few other enhancements. So in our notifications, we are adding a estimated end of weather period of concern. So I think that'll help people get a better sense for, as this weather concern is emerging, that we communicate in our notifications. We have when we think it's going to start and when we think it's going to end, at least from a weather watch perspective. So that will be an enhancement that we make. I think also for our notifications, what we're enhancing is that when we start to send notifications about it's getting close, we may need to de-energize, or we have de-energized, we are going to be adding a little bit more details, such as once we do reach that end of that weather pattern, then we'll provide what it typically takes to restore energy. And so we'll provide a little bit of that as well. And so again, every year we're getting better, we're improving, and we do have our forecasting at the wider circuit level, and we do a lot of work behind the scenes to minimize the actual number of people that we do need to de-energize, because we try to focus it on what's called a circuit segment rather than de-energizing the whole circuit. So that's what takes some time, is figuring out, okay, how do we minimize the impact? And the trade-off there is that less people need to be de-energized. So it's a balance between being accurate, but also taking our time to really try to minimize the number of people that have to be de-energized. So hopefully that gives a little bit more insight into some of the things that we're thinking of to improve our notifications.
Excellent. Great, thank you, Jessica, for the answer. And I have another question for you, Jessica. It's asking about battery backup systems for those customers with solar. I know you touched on that earlier, but can you focus on that? What Edison is doing to help those customers?
Yeah, my favorite topic. So for customers that have solar and they're interested in adding battery to their house, so they can add couple options. They can add a temporary portable battery for small appliances, as I mentioned, or they can go the route of getting a battery system for their whole house, for example, putting a Tesla Powerwall. And so when you pair a battery that's outfitted for your whole house system with your solar system, then you have a way to be able to have power that you can use throughout an outage. So for example, during the day, your battery's being charged up by your solar panels. And then when the sun isn't shining, you're using your battery. And really depends on how big you can get your battery system. And so let's say a 13, I think it's a kilowatt system, could last maybe 10 to 12 to 15 hours. And I also wanted to stress that if you don't have solar, you can still get a battery system for your house. So you just won't be able to have that continuous charging and discharging, but you can still have the battery that you can discharge to use for your house. So hopefully that gives an answer around how backup batteries could work with or without solar, as well as portable batteries.
Excellent. Thank you for that information, Jessica. This looks like it's going to be our last question of the night, and it's asking, how do I find out what tier my house is in? And I would recommend that you Google the CPUC high fire maps, and you should be able to track that down there. I also believe that our moderator also sent you a private message with that information. So best thing to do is to Google that information. And it looks like that's all the questions for tonight. So with that, I'm going to close it out and thank you all for participating in the evening tonight. As we mentioned earlier, there'll be a survey to provide us feedback on the meeting. And in addition, this is being recorded and it'll be posted on our website in a few days at sce.com/wildfire, as well as other information and resources. Thank you all again and have a wonderful evening.